and she's elected member of International Academy of Management and was ranked number 34 on the inaugural Thinkers 50 India list. She's also a member of Marshall Goldsmith's 100 Coaches Program, selected among 16,000 applicants. So that's a huge achievement for her, and I believe that she is going to bring a lot of value to this webinar when we talk about her father. But Deepa is also an active non-profit board member too. She's the advisory board of Global Peter Drucker Forum, Arogya World, and also a patron of the India Spora Forum. So without ado, more on that, but I just want to say that, hey, surprise, surprise, she's also daughter of Professor C.K. Prahalad. So need I say more what wisdom we're going to see here today? So on behalf of GMG, I'd like to thank Deepa and of course Ashwin Abhyankar for giving GMG an opportunity to bring Professor CK's work and profile to our community. There's so much to learn from this great son of India that he crossed all boundaries and made huge impact with his resourceful work across the world. Professor C.K. Prahalad needs no introduction, but his work cannot be covered in one single webinar. So we have decided to have 3 webinars to get introduced to himself as an individual person, and then the work he has done and the impact he has made to the society. And the culmination of this, the 3rd webinar will have some really eminent personality, and I will wait for the announcement at the end to make sure that we create that excitement when we speak to Deepa. And of course, what we have to do is, having said that, we know that this principle of the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid, it has started a movement, but there's a lot more to be done. And a lot more research has to be done, even though a lot of work has been done in different countries. So we will explore all such opportunities within the GMG platform and how we can take this work forward, create a think tank under the leadership of Deepa, and see if we can really help propagate this idea, which is very, very required in this new world. So over to you, Deepa. My first question will be, how do you, and moving to the personal side of it. So before you move on to that, I would like to, I want to make sure that people understand his entire life. So we will have a small video to begin with, and then I'll go to questions to Deepa. Just give me a second and I'll share that. Are you able to see the video?
Sandeep, we can't. Yeah, now wait a minute. Now it has started. It has started.
Globally renowned management thinker, an eminent thought leader, a prolific writer, with several international bestsellers to his credit. Professor Coimbatore Krishnarao Prahalad, known to close friends as CK, was all this and more. He was deeply committed to India's economic, cultural, and moral development, a commitment that led to the Padma Bhushan being conferred on him in 2009. Professor C.K. Prahalad was a distinguished university professor at the University of Michigan and was twice voted the world's leading management thinker by Thinkers 50, first in 2007 and again in 2009. He was also the winner of 4 McKinsey Awards for the Best Article of the Year in the Harvard Business Review. He is best known for his pioneering work titled The Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid, a book in which he outlined a model for large firms to engage with the economically backward sections of society. The Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Manmohan Singh, in his message said, Professor Prahalad's brilliance was dazzling. He was widely acclaimed as one of the most influential management thinkers ever, and his contribution to modern business theory and practice was invaluable. Professor Prahalad's bold and amazingly innovative ideas benefited companies around the world, including those of India. He was also a prolific writer, well known for many seminal works in the field of management.
Leaders must lead. You cannot lead unless you are future-oriented. Leadership is about the future. Leadership is about a point of view about the future.
Strategy to me is about folding the future in. It is not extrapolating the past and certainly not positioning yourself in the current. We need to have clarity with goals and the belief that we can invent the means. We must have a point of view of India we want to create and how to convert the principles enshrined in the Constitution into reality. I would like to call this Sampurna Azadi. The drive to entrepreneurship, the fundamental premise is your aspiration must always exceed your resources. You must have an aspiration which by design, not by default, which by design must exceed your resources. And that is when you create creativity and you get innovation. Benchmarking by definition assumes somebody is already there. India needs next practices. India must have the courage to chart its own path. And in the last 5 years, I've been spending a lot of time looking at opportunities at the bottom of the pyramid. We have the most phenomenal opportunity in the world. I suggested in a paper I wrote called My Vision for India 75 that the first step is to educate 500 million Indians in world-class skills. We must realize that achieving social justice in a complex polity such as India requires socio-political innovations of a massive scale. We have to reimagine politics and governance as it is practiced in India. 500 Rajas lived in this country before independence. The British did not want independence. In spite of all that, without television, without internet, without radio, without large number of newspapers, we created a common vision for all of India. I believe that India has the opportunity to actively shape the emerging world order. I believe that this is something that happens once in 50, 60 years. Once in a lifetime opportunity for India. India has the potential to be the beacon of hope for the whole world. Sense of Indianness is a prerequisite to accomplish this goal. India is the largest single experiment in democracy and social justice the world has ever seen. Leaders in India, in fact all Indians, have to ask themselves, what will be the judgment of history? What will be our legacy? I also believe that people want to be heard more than anything else. They hunger for opportunity more than handouts.
Every time I see this, chill goes through my spine. So I just want to make sure that we clap for his work. If everyone wants to do that, I believe it's a great honor, Deepa, and I really appreciate you taking time talking about him today, and also for the three-part series. So, great patriot, Professor Padma Bhushan CK, and I would like to go next to you, asking straight questions about his personal life. So how do you see CK's daily life, as he grew, when he was traveling abroad all over the world and building management theory? So what was that experience for you, Deepa?
Well, I think one of the interesting things about him, but before I get into any of that, I first want to really thank you, Sandeep, and Garze Marathe for hosting this. As you know, I'm a honorary Marathi through marriage, so it's a real privilege to speak to the community, and really appreciate all the effort that has gone into that. And if I really dive into what I think was different about my father compared to the traditional academic path, I would just have to point out he didn't start out as an academic. He was a manager at Union Carbide from a very young age, at only 21 years old. And he also had experience in another corporate called India Pistons. So he really had 9 years of corporate experience and breaks for study in between. So I don't think his focus was trying to come up with, a theory that didn't have an influence on practice. For him, the test of a good theory is what impact it has in the real world. And that was very important to him. And he also understood that managers, as you are trying to do the right things by their people, as they're trying to grow, they really need to both learn and act at the same time. And they have the luxury to take off for a month, reflect, and come back and study. So his focus for all his ideas was really on the relevance to people out in the field. And he had a tremendous empathy for them. And if I really think of what stands out for me the most, is just the amazingly inclusive approach he took. He was very busy. In my lifetime, he's always been Professor Prahalad, but even then he was always traveling, always engaged. But the approach he took when he was working on an idea was so wonderful. I mean, every day he would write something and he would print out 3 copies for my mom, my brother, and myself, and engage with us from a very early age, probably from the age of 8 or 10, and ask us for our thoughts and opinions on whatever he was doing. So we always felt very much engaged with what he was doing, with the issues that he cared about. And if I look back at
Deepa, we lost you, I think.
Deepa, you are muted. Deepa, you are muted.
Sorry, am I back now?
Yeah, you are back. Okay,
I must have been saying something stupid then. But in any case, I think when I look back, when you try to understand why some of his ideas were so influential, I think part of that is we were very fortunate. Prominent people were willing to experiment and try out what he was talking about. But the other thing is, I think his laser focus on trying to work on ideas that would make a difference to lots of different people. That bottoms up aspect, I think, is often forgotten. Everyone, even when you're an entrepreneur, if I could only get in front of this VC, or if I could have this person as a client, I would be sure to be successful. But I think that approach of saying, he would always challenge us whenever we were pressed for time, trying to decide where we should focus. He would always ask us, who would be better off because of this work? And that was the lens through which he decided where to focus his effort. And I think that's a really important aspect of his work. Oh, now we lost you, Sandeep, I think.
I muted myself just to make sure that you not disturbance, but yeah. No, great. I mean, again, that's what we also know about him, So now moving to a little bit more personal life of CK, if I may want to call him. He's a CK for anyways for us, but something which people are not aware of. Can you tell us some of his personal hobbies? What was he at home?
Yeah, I think, he didn't only study other companies. He really was this person of such broad interests. I think one of the things I always remember is any trip, no matter how long, the first thing he would do is, if it was still daylight, put his bags down and take a long walk with my mom and really just process everything. They would talk about all the things he had done and seen. And he really took inspiration from many different things and used those to understand the issues inside organizations. And the first is really a passion for art, and not for the aesthetic appreciation. I think he was very keen to understand the values and the skill sets of people by looking at art. Because as we know, I mean, resources are very different in different parts of the world, but I think he would always pull over to the side and appreciate excellence, whether it was how somebody was preparing food or how they were weaving a fabric. And he would really ask, how was this done? And that gave all of us over time an appreciation for the skills that exist. I think too often we start the conversation with what people don't have, not what their actual skills and aspirations are. And his focus on art as applied to innovation was really from the point of view that art is where you see a lot of synthesis. While there may be political conflict, that's a place where people see value and come together. And the focus is on harmony, not on efficiency. So I think that's a really important aspect. The other thing is he really had a love for nature. I mean, if he had any free time, guaranteed he would be watching an animal program. And it was always to look at how do different, people, these groups of animals, how do they signal when it's safe to venture out? How do they preserve resources? How do they protect their territory? And he would really bring that into his understanding of how organizations work. And, of course, the long walks have not been continued by me, but I think the one interest the two of us shared was, if he had any free time at all, he would always ask for, what are you reading? What are the novels? Because he would say, these are the real life experiences of people, and it's important to understand that as you're developing theory.
Yeah, of course. So were you aware of all this, his name and, what influence he had on the management thinking fraternity?
I think that was much later because, of course, his consulting work was highly confidential. So we didn't really discuss that much. And we weren't able to, attend any of his classes. Most of our interaction was with his students, who were very frequent visitors to our home. And once they were at home, my mom never let anyone go home without sitting and having dinner with us. So we did have a lot of interaction with his co-authors and with his students. And we also were able to spend several summers abroad when he was teaching at different universities. And so from there, I think we just gained an appreciation for the fact that good ideas just don't come one day with everyone sitting around with Post-it notes. It takes a long process of iteration and back and forth and taking input from different people. And there's nowhere where this was more on display than actually the bottom of the pyramid. I think, ironically, this is his most celebrated work, but very few people, he didn't talk about it much, but the struggle to get this into the public domain was really significant. Even though he was a really established academic at that point, this was the one paper that was rejected by all journals for over 4 years. Everybody said, what else are you working on? This sounds like a nice idea. We're not seeing the evidence. And he really persisted over time, kept talking to more people. And, this paper went underground on the internet, and finally Strategy and Business picked it up and published it in 2002. So what I think our takeaways from that were quite simple, but that deep personal commitment to helping others often precedes any great discovery, right? You have to spend the time to understand the problems and understand the aspirations as well, long before you come up with a way and a solid approach to do that. And we also know that, if I look at what's happened since then, you really come to it with an understanding that even your best effort and your best work, it really tends to serve more as inspiration for others, not the final word. And so he constructed his language that way. I mean, that's the one book where he suddenly kept his language so simple. And I joked with him one day. I said, aren't you making this a little too simple? And he said, no, this is a very deliberate choice, because what happens inside organizations is going to have a greater impact on all of our lives. So my contribution is to make it so simple to understand that the idea can be debated outside of academia, in the public domain, among managers, among entrepreneurs. And so I think that commitment to inclusion really extended even to the language he used.
Okay, I think that speaks volumes of how much influence he had in your life, because the way you are now well recognized into this world, you can see that has influenced. So next, can I request everyone to be on mute, please? Thank you. So, so moving next, you as a thinker, influencer in this new world, who's propagating his ideas, and the simple ideas he has brought, and they have become so powerful. So, and I know BOP is something which everybody knows, everybody talks about, and there are certain terms which people use, but you as an individual, as a next-gen thinker, what work of his has impressed you most,
I think there are two. I think, of course, the bottom of the pyramid is one of them, but the other is really the whole idea of strategic intent that he co-created with Gary Hamel. At the time, seems so simple now. I think when we have this explosion of entrepreneurship, this idea of aspirations exceeding resources, there's so much talk about the entrepreneurial mindset and this, but at the time they proposed this, it was 1989, and even earlier in some of the consulting work that they did. And the entire strategy fraternity, their concept was build on your strengths, essentially. I'm giving shorthand, of course, and fit between your resources and your goals. Nobody was suggesting that aspiration was a starting point. And they were among the first to really talk about emotion as an explicit tool in strategy creation. This was very different from where the rest of the field was going. And, I think now with the benefit of some age, I look back and I said, wow, I really see that immigrant experience is reflected in that. My parents were among a generation in the Indian diaspora who came wherever they went with a maximum of $8 in their pocket because of Indian exchange policy. And we're not the only ones. I think the people who have gone through that kind of wear it as a badge of honor today. But I think that experience, that lived experience, truly gives you some of that empathy gets forced upon you by your own life experience. And I know my brother and I were very young at the time they came to the University of Michigan. So there was no babysitters. We all went in a car together. And I remember one time when we were trying to open a bank account and they said, you don't have enough money to open up a bank account. And he went through this process of, talking to everybody and finally pleading with the manager and convincing him to open a bank account. So some of this was really lived experience. I think he understood that resources are easy to measure and see, but every person who has left their village to go to the big city or gotten on the plane to come to a new country is really only doing so in search of a better life. And I think he really believed that the work of organizations was to bring those aspirations within reach. And so I think this was, now you see a lot more of leaders sharing their life experience in some form, sharing their aspirations. It was not common at that time, and I think that's why it had such a huge impact.
Wow, and that so speaks volume of the passion you have and the way you're talking. Itself, we can see that, all that. So great. So before I move to the last question, and then we'll open it for some question and answers from the people who are attending this seminar, I want to then dive into this one very important article he wrote with another Padma Bhushan, Dr. Mashilkar, in the Innovation's Holy Grail, right? There's a mention of Jugaad innovation, And that became a very popular term in fact, when I was growing and listening to all that wisdom when she and Professor Mashelkar were also talking about. And one concept which prominently came to everybody's mind was Gandhian engineering. And recently, last year, Dr. Mashelkar spoke about it again. So it looks like Dr. Mashelkar is really promoting this and the work they work together upon, right? So what do you think now apart from Dr., what can the world do? What can we do to promote these ideas to work at the bottom of the pyramid? And also, I would like you to mention some of the initiatives you have seen which are already making good progress in this world. And I know a few of them are here on this call, so I would like to call them out. And if you can call them out, that will be great. And then we can talk about them at a later stage. But very focused, I want to get an answer from you. What can we do, and what can the world learn from his thinking?
Well, I think what he really drove home in other works, but certainly in this one, is the idea that imagination is the most critical resource that organizations have. I think it's also really a reflection of his deep optimism for people who are the poorest of the poor and people inside organizations to collaborate and make the world a better place. And I think he's really talking about innovation as more than a set of ideas, but also a set of ideals. And one of the things that I would really like to emphasize, I know we have students on the call, is that this was also a work that reflected his deep belief in the younger generation. All of his other works were written with academic colleagues. And of course, he collaborated with Professor Stuart Hart on the first paper. But the cases in the book were actually entrusted to his students. He knew that this cause was going to live beyond him, and that we really needed a set of evangelists, not just a lot of analysis. I think what's changed since that time is that entrepreneurs have taken up this cause in a way they didn't imagine. The people who have really developed a lot of new capabilities are also in the NGO world. There's been a lot of activity on the philanthropic side as well. But what is unfortunate today, I think, is that we find ourselves needing this work more, not less. And that was not the goal. The original book said, I hope we can eliminate poverty by 2020. That was when he wrote it in 2004. We're nowhere near there. I think there is so much more that needs to be done. And I think there is today one real positive that I see. There's this growing recognition that these issues are not emerging market issues. These are global struggles, and the nuances may be different. But the reality that we are trying to address of inequality, of lack of opportunity, disenfranchisement is very universal. And if we are able to bring together both community and the capabilities that large organizations have and an innovative approach, that is how we can move a lot of people. And I think he had this one very radical thought that I would like to leave people with, is that he really thought of entrepreneurs as the freedom fighters of the modern age. He would always say, if you really look at all of the constitutional values, all of the statements that companies can make, those are important, but somebody has to create those pathways to make it possible. And that was what he devoted a lot of his time, and why he supported so many entrepreneurs. So I know this was literally something that this last paper with Dr. Mashelkar was something that he really was discussing in his hospital bed shortly before he passed away. And that phrase, more for less for more, I think is a call to action around the world. And what's really exciting for me is to see that, thank you again for this opportunity, Sandeep, to discuss and reflect. What I'm really excited about is that it's now at a point where we've lost count of the entrepreneurs who have taken us up, but large organizations and even governments are discussing at least the spirit of this work, if not this book per se. I think the spirit of what he outlined is very much, a global issue. And I think there are so many organizations, the University of Michigan, Confederation of Indian Industry. I have my friend Mariano here, who's with the Kaufman Center, my friend Hasib. I don't know if Abhijit has had a chance to join. So we feel very privileged. Jaipur Rugs, I think they were planning to have some people. So I think there are a lot of people who have redoubled down on their commitment to this idea, and I'm only happy to support and amplify their good work.
Indeed, indeed. I think, as you said, a lot is yet to be done. And with this pandemic, I think the acceleration for the need of it has, more prominent now. And this is what we want to basically bring it back as a society. Somebody who want to celebrate his life by really contributing to the work, and he has put it in a very simple way for all of us to lead. So would you like to, and before we move on to the Q&A session, which Anand, I'm sure you're on top of it, but the most important question is, who are the key prominent entrepreneurs? And I know you called out a few of them, and I know some of the studies we are going to talk in next week. Next week's session. But do you see anyone here, or at least you want to recognize and acknowledge the work done? Maybe academicians, maybe the entrepreneurs or the big corporates. And I know Mr. Nitin Paranspe from Lever is a great fan of his work as well. Just to hear from you.
Yeah, I think there are so many leaders today who are talking about this. You see a lot of new structures as well to take this work forward. There's impact investing. There's a huge, movement with this business roundtable in the United States. They have the Giving Pledge. They have lots of people pledging to do this. So I think now the challenge is really execution. And what we may not have paid significant attention to in the first round is there was a lot of emphasis on technology and closing the information gap. I think we have paid probably insufficient attention to the physical environment. And that is what has really become obvious during this crisis. I see, though, that there are fantastic entrepreneurs on this call. Our family friend, Hema Anamalai from Coimbatore, they've all really dug their heels in and created tangible products and services, not apps, things that are transformative. And I think the most powerful entrepreneurs in this space have not really said, well, the income might not be great, so let's do a minimum viable product. The mindset I take for the bottom of the pyramid is, when I'm buying shoes for my own child, the first thing I do is I press down on the toes to make sure there's room to grow. And that has to be the mindset with which we approach how we design for all groups of customers, but certainly here, because the goal is to take people forward and to help them, master their circumstances. People intuitively know what they need to move forward in life. If you look at what's been adopted by the poorest of the poor, it's been cell phones, finance, branded fashion, IT services. So none of those are really reflected in our traditional view of needs. All of those are rooted in aspiration. And so this whole idea of aspiration greater than resources is such a, cornerstone of this field. And I think that the entrepreneurs who will make a difference will keep that in mind. And the nice thing to see is that people from all segments in society are hopefully also carrying with them an aspiration of a more equitable society. And I think when we bring those two together, there's so much that can be done.
Right, excellent. Yes, indeed, we can do more. And just for people who may not know, the C in CK stands for Coimbatore. So I just thought, I saw Miss Hema on the call here. So she wants to ask a question, and I would like her to ask the next question. To begin with, Anand, if that is okay?
Yeah, that's okay. Hema, you can invite Hema. Hema, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, Deepa, for the invitation. Such a pleasure to be here. And I'm from Coimbatore. And I just will take 1 minute to just introduce my venture to build electric vehicles for the rural markets of India. Is an idea that generated out of CKP's book. And I have even framed his photo in my conference room in the office. And when Gayatri Prahalad came to my office, she was in tears. And that's a moment that I will never forget. Because such was the inspiration from his book that I knew that a brand could be built, a mobility solution can be made for people from people from the rural India, right? So that's just a quick background. I exited the venture, built it for about 12 years, exited and sold it to a bigger company. Now, one of the pressing thought that's going in my mind is, how do we build jobs for people from smaller towns, okay? Now, these are all people that are graduates, don't know anything. Their parents are farmers, they don't know anything. First-time engineers, first-time graduates, and I wanted to do it in scale. So I wanted some suggestions from people here that this has to be a moment of, I loved it when Deepa said that entrepreneurship as freedom fighters for the modern world. I mean, that will stay with me in this call, right? So how do we create this? Because this set of people need help. And there's no one model that can work. So design, it has to be thought through. A business model has to be thought through. And here I'm willing to do this for the next 30 years to make this vision come true, Deepa. I need your support. I don't know, because I am an executor on the ground in India, but I need to little bit abstract it and think it in a much broader space to be able to make a difference. And I think with your support and support from all of y'all, we should make this for India.
Okay. Nice question. Deepa, over to you.
Yeah, this is a pressing problem throughout the world, actually, that you're really seeing that a lot of technological advances are not increasing employment. So I think the business model is now the next area of scrutiny. What's really happened is, people have focused on making things more efficient, but we've left a lot of people behind. And if I look at, and then what happens as a consequence is, I think the group of people you end up designing for becomes more and more narrow. So right. I love the convenience of online banking and online grocery shopping. But you know what? I used to know the person who bagged my groceries. I used to know the person in the bank, and they were in my mind's eye when I was designing something. But I think we also can use tech more intelligently. I mean, a lot of it today is designed to find a match, to find the people like you. And what we know about innovation is that a lot of the great ideas come from far outside the field. So I think we can use technology to design the mismatch as well, to help us bring in the perspectives that we don't naturally have in the course of our lives, and let those happy accidents happen, right? I mean, a lot of great companies were invented by college roommates or people who met by chance. I know all of my father's work with Gary Hamel was because Gary attended a seminar he was giving, and we argued so much back and forth that instead of getting upset, my father said, okay, we must have this man home for dinner and let's test this out. They had this great partnership that was very influential. So I think that's a place to start, but I don't think anyone has answers, and they shouldn't pretend that they do. I think these will be discovered by experiments, not won over by debate.
I have 2 experiments in line, which I will send it to you, Deepa. I wanted your value add. Anybody who feel can contribute. But we should make this done for India. We should make this work. I think tech is the only place that can make a difference. And just one related question is your father born in Coimbatore? That's why it's called Coimbatore?
Yes, he was born in Coimbatore.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent.
Sandeep, take over.
Yeah, just to add, Hema, and thank you for sharing your experience and what you have done so far. Definitely count us in to reach out to you for the next think tank we are trying to build out of this world.
Thank you. Sure.
So we will make sure that you become part of this team, and let's do something what we are started with this webinar. So
definitely.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Deepa, I would like to call Mr. Abhijit Bansur if he's there on the call, just in case to introduce. We are going to talk.
Abhijit is there. Abhijit is there. Abhijit Bansur. He was there. Okay.
Deepa, Mr. Hasit is there. I believe I saw him in the morning.
Yes, let me check in if Hasit is there.
No, Abhijit is there. He had joined, but I think he is not yet.
Hasit is here though.
Would you like to?
Introduce my friend Hasit. We actually met when I was speaking at the Ahmedabad Management Association, and he reached out and said, I'm really trying to build a sustainable roofing solution in emerging markets. And we just first met over Skype and have collaborated since. Of course, I say that loosely. I've been in touch on WhatsApp, and he's done all the hard work on the ground. But I think he has created a really internationally meaningful, game-changing solution of roofing tile that is sustainable, that can be retrofitted onto an existing structure. And